Genesis. Before the NBA even existed, basketball was an evolving experiment with peach baskets, laced balls, and players who shot like they were trying to throw a rock over a fence. In 1946, a group of hockey arena owners formed the Basketball Association of America, BAA, to keep their venues busy on off nights, and pro basketball was officially born. Teams like the New York Knicks and Toronto Huskies tipped off the first game, and early stars like Joe Fulks were basically the proto-Jordan, pulling up from 15 feet while defenders stood flat-footed. There were no shot clocks, no three-point lines, and barely any athleticism. Think YMCA ball, but with more suits in the stands. Players used set shots, wore belts instead of drawstrings, and ran offenses that looked more like a marching band routine than organized sport. But even in this caveman stage, the seeds of stardom were planted. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't fast, but it was the beginning. This was basketball, before basketball really knew what it was. 1947 to 1956, the set shot era. Now officially the NBA, the league was still more about figuring it out than filling arenas. George McCon was the first real superstar, basically Shaq with goggles and a soft hook shot, and he bullied his way to titles with the Minneapolis Lakers. But the pace was glacial. No shot clock meant teams could stall for entire quarters, and scores like 1918 weren't uncommon. The league was white-dominated both on the court and in the front office, and nobody was building around athleticism, let alone a black superstar. Guys like Bob Cousy and Paul Arizin brought some flair, but it was mostly ground-bound play with the set shot still king. Earl Lloyd became the NBA's Jackie Robinson in 1950, and by the mid-50s, the league introduced the 24-second shot clock to finally inject some life. Bob Pettit took the first MVP in 1956, dropping numbers that wouldn't look out of place in the 80s. This era walked so the modern NBA could someday run. 1957 to 1967, Romantic Era. When Bill Russell arrived, the game changed overnight. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to just score. You had to defend, run, and dominate the boards. Russell was Dennis Rodman with 5 extra inches and 10 more rings. His Celtics won 9 of 11 titles during this stretch and turned team defense into a religion. Wilt Chamberlain, meanwhile, was rewriting what was humanly possible, dropping 50 points a game and averaging more rebounds than some teams. Think Giannis's athleticism with Jokic's stat lines and Shaq's intimidation. The league began leaning heavily into athleticism, and by the late 60s, half the league was black, a seismic shift from a decade earlier. Oscar Robertson was Luka with a mid-range game and better defense. Jerry West was a smoother Damian Lillard with lockdown D. Elgin Baylor was Zion before Zion, skywalking on fast breaks. By 67, set shots were fossils, and players were operating at a pace and intensity that laid the groundwork for everything that came next. 1968 to 1979, chaos. The 70s were a beautiful mess. Expansion teams sprouted like weeds, diluting talent across 22 squads and creating pockets of random brilliance. The ABA burst onto the scene with its red, white, and blue ball and turned the dunk into a marketing weapon, injecting flash into a league still chasing its identity. Julius Erving flew through the air like a proto-Vince Carter, while Kareem Abdul-Jabbar perfected the skyhook, stacking MVPs with terrifying consistency. The league was full of guys who peaked early. Think if Brandon Jennings had become the norm, and by the time teams figured out who they were, the roster had already been flipped. Player empowerment was gaining steam thanks to rising salaries, but cocaine use, locker room feuds, and incompetent ownership turned the league into a revolving door of dysfunction. The 1976 merger brought Dr. J, George Gervin, and other ABA icons into the NBA proper, but it didn't magically fix the chemistry issues or the inconsistent competition. If the 60s were about dynasties, the 70s were about roulette. 7 different champs, no repeats, and a whole lot of weight. That guy made the All-Star team. It was unpredictable, unstable, and somehow still unforgettable. 1980 to 1992, the Showtime era. Then came Magic and Bird, two saviors who didn't just revive the NBA, they rebranded it. Bird was Larry Legend with a sniper's aim and a construction worker's mentality, jawing at opponents while burying threes in their face. Magic was a 6'9" point guard who passed like Steve Nash with LeBron's vision, all while grinning like he was having the time of his life. Together, they turned Celtics versus Lakers into the basketball version of the Beatles versus the Stones, with coast-to-coast appeal and a cultural spotlight the league had never seen. The NBA finally had star stability. Guys like Isaiah Thomas, Hakeem Olajuwon, Charles Barkley, and Michael Jordan arrived. and suddenly the talent pool was stacked like a 2K My Team roster. The three-point shot became a legitimate weapon instead of a novelty. The dunk contest evolved into must-see TV, and franchises began investing in continuity, building around superstars with rosters that lasted more than a season. Boston, LA, and Detroit all built mini dynasties that defined the decade. Meanwhile, Jordan was quietly brewing into the most lethal scorer since Wilt, with a competitive fire so intense it made even Bird and Magic look casual. This was the league's second golden age, part basketball, part soap opera, and pure all-time greatness every single night. 1993 to 2003, Attitude. When Jordan left the game for the first time in '93, it was like a rock band losing its frontman. Everything got weird. The league expanded too fast, star players got hurt or flamed out, and everyone seemed more focused on mixtapes, highlight reels, and sneaker deals than actual fundamentals. It was the era of Iverson's swagger, Vince Carter's dunks, and Marbury's crossover, but also a time when games regularly ended 83 to 79, and offense felt like an afterthought. Defense ruled the day, too much so, and the natural flow of the game got choked out by isolation sets and hand checking. Players like Allen Iverson were magnetic, iconic even, but the teams around them often lacked structure, floor spacing, or a consistent identity. Dirk Nowitzki, the rare international star who arrived young and stayed, helped stretch the floor and modernize the forward position. But he was more the exception than the rule. There was cultural brilliance, hip-hop, streetwear, tattoos, and a whole lot of attitude, but the actual basketball product often felt clunky and uninspired. Think WWE's Attitude Era. Unforgettable characters, iconic moments, but questionable plots and shaky execution. And David Stern made sure his fingerprints were all over it, micromanaging everything from dress codes to media narratives, for better and worse. By the end of the decade, it was clear the league needed a reset. 2004 to 2013, Superteams era. This is where things got slick and serious. LeBron, Wade, Bosh, Carmelo all came in at once, and the league suddenly had Ivy League level talent in terms of basketball IQ, versatility, and pure skill. Stars started ditching the "I'm loyal to my team" act and began building their own dynasties, making player movement a power play instead of a betrayal. LeBron was a new age Magic with a linebacker's body and a genius-level court sense. Wade was a mix of Jordan's grit and Iverson's speed, all wrapped in South Beach swagger. CP3 had Stockton's vision, Gary Payton's bark, and a knack for controlling tempo like a symphony conductor. Teams like the Celtics, Pierce, KG, Allen, and the Heat, LeBron, Wade, Bosh, embraced the super team model and made it the new blueprint. Everyone started wearing suits to pressers, ditching the dunk contest like it was jury duty, and turning post-game interviews into branding opportunities. The 2004 Redeem Team disaster forced USA Basketball to hit the reset button, and by 2008, the program was locked in like a Fortune 500 startup. Analytics, floor spacing, and smarter roster construction took over front offices. This was the third golden age, loaded with talent, shaped by storylines, and led by stars who understood they were global brands before they ever hoisted a trophy. 2014 to now, age of the three-pointer. Steph Curry walked in and essentially said, "What if I shot from 30 feet all the time?" And the league changed overnight. The three-pointer didn't just become a tool, it became the centerpiece, the currency of modern basketball. Big men like Roy Hibbert went extinct faster than Blockbuster, and paint-dwelling dinosaurs were replaced by stretchy, switchable unicorns. Teams that couldn't shoot, space the floor, or switch on defense were cooked before tip-off. The Warriors weren't just a team, they were a movement, literally and figuratively, built on relentless ball movement, off-ball chaos, and absurd three-point barrages. Meanwhile, LeBron continued to redefine longevity, winning a title in the bubble, passing Kareem in career points, and somehow still looking like Thanos in year 21. Jokic became the weirdest cheat code since Bird. Imagine if Dirk and Jason Kidd had a baby with soft hands and perfect footwork, while Giannis bulldozed through defenders like a Greek freight train with no brakes. But here's the twist. There's been no dynasty. Since 2019, 6 different champs, each with their own style, strategy, and flaws. Load management, international dominance, shout out Wemby, and superstar mobility have turned every offseason into a Marvel post-credit scene, full of speculation, reveals, and chaos. The NBA isn't about who is on top anymore, it's about who might be next. And maybe, just maybe, the newest era is still stretching its limbs. If you like this video, YouTube thinks you'll like this next one, so stick with Basketball for Dummies and give it a watch.